Hello everyone. Welcome to a new session of Wiki Heritage Hour. I am Kushi, the coordinator at Wiki World Heritage. To give you all a brief introduction about us, Wiki World Heritage is an affiliate of the Wikimedia Foundation, the foundation behind Wikipedia and other collaborative projects. Our mission is the participatory creation of open content about UNESCO World Heritage sites through thematic projects that we implement in collaboration with heritage organizations, NGOs, and other Wikimedia affiliates. Among our projects, there is Toll Cities, which focuses on the documentation of World Heritage cities. Another project is World Heritage in Danger, which focuses on documentation of sites inscribed in the danger list. We launched our third project titled Wiki Heritage Hour on African World Heritage Day, that is 5th May 2022. The aim of this project is to create a platform for discussion and underrepresented heritage with young researchers, experts, as well as established institutes and NGOs working in the field of heritage conservation. So, coming to the today's session, today our session is on the topic role of museology in heritage conservation. We have two distinguished speakers with us today, Mr. Mudzunga Muzdeshi and Mr. Francis Avinda. To give a brief introduction about our speakers, our first speaker, Mr. Francis, pursued his PG in Museum and Heritage Studies at the University of the Western Cape, University of Cape Town, and Robben Island Museum in South Africa as a Rockefeller Scholar. During his studies, Francis developed a conservation management plan for World War II gun emplacements in Robben Island. In 2011, he joined the Wiki Africa project, which focuses on getting external Africa based cultural organizations, museums, and archives, as well as bloggers and journalists to contribute their knowledge to Wikipedia. This project is an international collaboration that intends to Africanize Wikipedia by creating and expanding 30,000 articles on Wikipedia. Our second speaker today is Mr. Mudzuka. Mr. Mudzuka began his academic journey in 2006 at the University of Pretoria, majoring in heritage and cultural sciences with a focus on heritage, cultural tourism, and archaeology. He also pursued an honors degree in archaeology at the University of Venda, and he completed his master's degree in archaeology from the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. He has delivered several lectures and presented papers in archaeology and museums in various different conferences in the last decade. In 2019, he also presented a paper at SAMA at the 87th SAMA conference in 2023. He is also a professional member of ICOM and SAFA and has received the Archaeological Golden Trowel Award from the University of Pretoria. Once again, I'd like to welcome both the speakers. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will now give the floor to Mr. Mutsunga to share his brief presentation with us.
Thank you very much, Keshi. I will now show my presentation. Okay. Also, I want to thank you very much once again. As Keshi has said, the topic of today is role of museums in heritage conservation. So at the moment, I'd like to let you know that I'm based at the KZN Museum, KwaZulu-Natal Museum, and I'm the collections manager or collections technician, so to say. So I deal with collections under Human Sciences Department. So just to go on with the topic of today, so I would like to start with just to let you know that museums have a significant role in our heritage conservation. I mean, in terms of heritage conservation. And I would like to tell you that museums have always been there, and museums keep on changing through time. And the first slide here is just to compare what museums used to be like and what museums are like today in terms of roles in heritage conservation. The item that I would like us to look at is the definition of a museum. What is a museum? That's one significant thing that we should look at first before we even go further. I also like to look at what museums were always made for. Were initially made for. What was the biggest motive behind the idea of having a museum? And I want us to look at the relevance of museum today, and as compared to to when museums were first initiated. I would also like us to look how museums have transformed and the issue of sustainability and inclusivity. Those are the, that's the introduction to my presentation regarding this topic of today. And when we go to the next slides, what is a museum? Um, that is a definition that we need to look at today.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the slides are not changing.
Oh, sorry, this is really a challenge. I don't know what's going on because I'm changing the slides. I'm trying to move as fast as possible. Can you see? Does it make any difference?
No.
It's not making any difference. This is a challenge.
Can you
Um,
try resharing?
what can you see? What can you see on your screen?
Okay, damn.
Okay, now we can
Move.
see. Yes.
Mhm,
Now you can see. Okay.
mhm.
Yes.
I think what I will do here, I will just so can they check? Can you see anything?
Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so
It's
I think
working
Yep.
now.
Mhm.
what
It's
I'll do,
perfect. Yes.
I will avoid slideshow because I think that seems to be a problem. So I'll just go to the next slide without slideshow.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sure you never saw this slide. So this is what I was just speaking about. That what we it's just an introduction to my topic. I've spoken about this, and now the definition of a museum. So I want us to look at this. So museum definition has always been there since the idea of museum was initiated, and we must all know that museums were first initiated in the 15th century, but they were initiated as galleries, places where they were displaying objects like artworks. Um, and but only in the 16th century, that's when we first had an absolute museum, an actual museum. That was 1734 to be exact, and it was the Capitoline Museum in Rome, that is in Europe. And the idea of museum was based on science and art. That was the first, that was the main idea of museum, of having museum, just to display science and art. And science, by science, I mean, mathematics and natural history. And now let us look at the definition of a museum. There's always been definition even before 1900s, but I want us to focus on the ICOM definition, that is International Council of Museums. And the first definition, official definition made by ICOM was made in 1946. And that was accepted, that definition was accepted and adopted in Paris, where they had the first general assembly. And in that definition, they've agreed that the word museum itself, it should include all collections. By all collections, I mean natural and cultural heritage. It should be open to public. It should be of artistic, technical. It should be scientific, historical, or archaeological material. And it should also include zoos and botanical gardens, but also including libraries. I mean, also excluding libraries, except insofar as they maintain permanent exhibitions. I mean, permanent exhibition rooms. And so now, if you look at this slide, this is just to show you how museums looked like then, how this idea came about. So one, you have to understand that museums then, galleries galleries and museums, they were private institutions. They were not open to public. This is prior to 1946. They were not open to public, but private institutions, and they were primarily made for curiosity. It was mainly for curiosity. I'll give you one example here. If you look at the image in the middle center here, the top center image here, there's a jar of specimens, and some of those containing some malformed humans. These are these are images of humans with malformations. And I spoke of the Capitolian Museum in Rome. If you look at the top, right at the top, top right corner of my slides, there are some objects there. These are artworks. These are statues in the Capitolian Museum that was established in 1734, and you can see how the museums looked like back then. And so the idea was to just to show fun, just to exhibit fun, just to display fun. um Strange things, exotic things, mysterious things, and some monstrous objects, and a bit of mix of artifacts and natural history, as I've mentioned earlier on. And in terms of mysterious and monstrous objects, look at that image up there on the top left corner of my slide. There's some public people. There's people there looking at some beautiful or some exotic, or some weird natural history items. Um, Also, look at the bottom right image there, where there's a lot of people looking at displays on the tables and some on the walls. So it's just a matter of curiosity. And also there on the bottom left, that's just a portrait made by the lady called Marilan Nguyen, who made this painting in about 1844. So she's just showing how museums looked like back then. Okay. Um, if we go to the next slide, now this is where I want us to focus from now on, because I think this is where our conversation, or the topic of the day, would be more based on the new definition of ICOM. So this definition was accepted and adopted last year, 22. I think it was 22 August last year in Prague, that is Czech Republic. It was an ICOM General Assembly meeting, and they agreed that a museum is a not-for-profit permanent institution in the service of society that researches, collects, conserves, which is our main topic today, interprets and exhibits tangible and intangible heritage. Museums should open to public, accessible, and inclusive. Museums foster diversity and sustainability. They operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of communities, which is very important, offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. So this is the definition. This is where actually it explains everything about the role of museums in conservation. Now let's go to the next slide. Now the next slide, it shows us the primary significant of I mean the primary significant role of museums in museums conservation. But before we go further, I want us to add the aspect of preservation to this topic, because with museums, the significance of museum is to preserve and conserve, and you cannot preserve without conserving. So they all go hand in hand. So the significance of museums in heritage conservation should involve preservation of both natural and cultural heritage. Now, if you look at this image here, it shows this is a dinosaurs, and this is an image of the Ezekiel Museums in Cape Town. Um, it's an image of a dinosaur. So what this means is that we need to preserve our natural heritage, because if we don't do that, then we won't have this. We won't have the future generation won't have reference, because dinosaurs, for instance, we're talking about extinction here. If we don't preserve our natural heritage, then we are faced with extinction. So that is the role of a museum, to preserve, to educate people how best we can preserve our natural history. Same applies to the other photo here. This is just another world of natural history. Because remember, if we don't preserve this, if we don't conserve our natural heritage, we are going to we are not making good relationship with nature, because without nature we are no more. Okay. And then also preserving cultural heritage. You can see here, this is an image of me and my colleagues. We just trying to show you some of the objects that we should be preserving and conserving. That's some artwork, some craft work from in the West Africa. And then we've got some more objects here that we were trying to do. This is me and my colleagues. We were just doing some conservation work and preservation on some materials. This is a cowrie shell necklace. So we're trying to find the best way to preserve this. And same applies here with an object from Sierra Leone. That's a headdress from Sierra Leone. So this is what we do as collections managers, curators, and or museum practitioners as a whole. So now when we go to the slides, next slide is next slide is to do with conservation. Fortunately, it's not showing. It should be showing now. It's to do with conservation. This is the most significant role of museum, uh, but this is based on the topic of today. So I'll make this a significant role based on the topic of today. So conservation of heritage objects. So now, if you look down here on these images, you can see a whole team of conservators, a whole team of museum practitioners. They are working on heritage objects. For instance, this is these two images, this one and this one. These are skin. These are conservators working on skin or leather objects. These are leather objects. They were infected by mold. Mold is caused by environmental conditions that are not in favor of museum objects. And then if the environmental conditions are not in good control, then we are faced with mold situation. So, but it is our role as museum, to intervene and make sure that we preserve that, and I mean we conserve those items so they are well preserved. And also insect infestation. Those are items that we are concerned with. So this is us trying to work on that. And the image here, this is just a firearm, an
Uh,
ancient firearm.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. I'll just like to remind you, can you please wrap it up in the next few minutes so that we have more time for interaction?
Yes. Yeah, I'll be wrapping up soon. I'll be trying fast. And then, yeah, so all these images are just to do with the conservation of our heritage objects. And then another significant thing is just to educate, by educating the communities, educating learners, educating whosoever about our heritage. Then we are just spreading our more knowledge to the communities as to how we can best preserve and conserve our heritage. You can do that through behind the scenes in the museums, or outreach, or some other fun activities. And you can do also live performances to preserve intangible heritage. You can display our attires. You can display just to educate people. And then quickly, if we go to, I've talked about communities, I'm not going to repeat that. It's just to get communities involved, which goes back to the new definition of museums. So communities must be involved, and then in that way you're educating them. And then you must also be able to work with with heritage legislation authorities, because people must learn the legislation so that they don't fall in on the wrong side of the legislation. So you teach them on how to conserve and preserve our heritage. And then quickly, as I conclude, I would say that museums, as much as we are doing, we are, the problem is we are understaffed and we cannot do this by ourselves. So those are the challenges museums are faced with: understaffed, and that is due to poor funding. As public institution, we should expect funding from the state and so forth, but poor funding leads to understaffing. And then we know that we are doing what we are able to do, but it's not enough. But after all, we are heading towards the right direction. And thank you.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation and giving us the brief insights of what is museum and how it plays a role in our how it plays a role in our society. So, as we start our interactive session, my first question to both of you is a very general question before we dive into museology, that why is preserving and maintaining all these cultural aspects of our heritage important?
Let me go first. Because the reason why museums conserve this object is because a lot of objects, especially in African heritage, most of the objects that we have are living, kind of living objects. So when they're taken from their source point, which might be having a different, maybe climatic conditions and all that, and they're brought inside the museum, then the museum is forced to come up with ways to maintain the sort of same temperatures or climatic conditions of those objects from where they were found, picked up from. So that is important because, uh, as we know, museums are there to protect the culture of the country and to, the national heritage. Um, so for them to do that, conservation is a key and primary role of museums. Um, I, Sometimes we talk about conservation, but also we also have to look at the challenges that the same museums face in terms of trying to, bringing in conservators, coming up with different formulas to maintain these objects. So I'll say that the key role of museum is conservation and preservation. That is the main thing that most museums are there for. Unless Muzu, you have some other thoughts about it.
No, I think you've covered most, and I think some of the things I've covered on the already on the presentation. But I think one thing too that I would like to emphasize is that um, remember we having museums because we want the next generation to experience what we have experienced or what the previous societies or generations have experienced. That is why we preserve and conserve heritage objects. So it's just to, it's just to keep, it's just to keep heritage alive for the next generation. That is the most important thing. That's why we preserve them and conserve them.
Mhm.
True, very true.
Mhm.
And when we are talking about the term museology,
Mhm.
what all aspects are covered under the name of museology? Like some of the things that you mentioned in your presentation, that conservation and preservation of these artifacts. What else does the entire terminology of museology encompasses?
Um, I think collections management is very significant. Yeah. So it's where heritage conservation and preservation falls under that collections management. Francis did speak of environmental conditions. That is part of collections management. So it's what museology encompasses, and also there is an aspect of research. Research is significant because remember, museums are research centers. That's where people come and do research. Scientists and historians and all those, they come and do research. Education. Education is significant. We are supposed to educate people. We are supposed to educate the public, and we need to have displays, exhibitions. Exhibitions, we are interpreting what we have in the collections, what we have. We are interpreting our heritage to the people out there. And I think also, as the definitions, the ICOM definition says, we need to, the inclusivity and communities getting communities involved. I think those are the critical issues that are museology encompasses.
Yeah, I'll chip in and say also museums play a critical role in education, public programming, and all that. So when we talk about museology, there's an aspect of education, um, uh, there's an aspect of public programming, because as much as we collect these objects and put them in this facility, where sometimes they say museums, um, you know, we collect objects and put them in the museums. But when you talk about African objects, it's something that we need to interact with it every now and then. So the fact that they've been removed from the source point to the museum it's now up to the museum to bring the element of education to the mass, to the people, to let them know, hey, this object, it was used many years back. We have stored it in the museum as a way of conserving it and preserving it, but this is the importance of this object. So the education part of our museum and as in regard to public programming is very important. Yeah.
That's very true, and actually that brings me to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
That essentially, when any item is preserved in a museum, it is an item that is taken away from its original place. So,
Mm-hmm.
does one balance the sensitivity of such things while curating museums?
Yeah, that's correct. I will make an example with archaeology, how archaeology works. When
Mm-hmm.
um, when we go out to the fields and excavate, we take the materials from the original, from their original state,
Mm-hmm.
well, not necessarily originally, but where they are archaeologically, preserved. We bring them back to the museum, a different environment. So we know that it's not so good to change, because once you do that, those objects are going to be reactive to new environmental conditions. So but what we do, we try by all means and maintain the environment where it's coming from, and try and create a mock environment where we have just moved this item to. um, I think environmental conditions is the thing, because if you don't do that, then your heritage objects will deteriorate. So we try by all means to maintain the environment, and also we also need to remember that by doing that, we're doing that because we trying to preserve. If say for instance a rock art site, if on a rock art site you go to a rock art site and try and chop out a piece of painting there, take it out from the cave or wherever it is, and put it bring it back to the museum to display it, and then uh, it's because you want to preserve it from natural disasters where it could get destroyed, and then try and put it in the safest environment. So, but the best thing is to maintain the environment that it's coming from.
I think a lot of this is a very kind of controversial topic because and especially in relation to world heritage and those kind of stuff. So, for example, I'll say like the Great Zimbabwe. Um, at some point, people had access to that site. They'll go and do their stuff in there. But once this site was inscribed as a World Heritage Site, then there was some sort of restriction. So even though the people were using it, as a place maybe for, to do their rituals and things like that. But once a site becomes inscribed as a heritage site, then the local communities don't have that, access as they used to have, because now they're talking about we want to conserve this site. So this is some of the things that, some of the controversy of conservation and all that. You know, yeah.
That is very true.
Mm-hmm.
The legislation and documentation can sometimes also hinder from communities
Mm-hmm.
participating in the conservation in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you think these museums can help get more engagement from the community, and how can we ensure
Mm-hmm.
that the museums that we create are accessible to everyone, and especially to the communities whose heritage is being showcased there?
Yeah. Yes. No, you can go ahead, Francis.
Oh, I was just going to bring the aspect of community museums, which tend to be very successful in, bringing in community participation in the collection they have, because they're started by the community and they serve to the benefit of the community. They're not totally detached from the local community. So that's what I was thinking. Mhm.
Yeah. So also, I think one of the best thing that museums can do is I'm sure you've heard of what they call mobile museum.
Mhm.
So mobile museum is taking the museum, well, not necessarily the museum, but
Mhm.
a sample of items to that represent a museum, to the
Mhm.
communities, to
Mhm.
places where those people have, they find it difficult to access museum, maybe places where are very far from museums. So if museums takes objects and try and have a mock museum in their areas, in the communities, then it gives those people a bit of a glimpse of what museums look like and ownership, because if the items are being brought back to them, then they
Mhm.
have that ownership sense in them. There's an element of ownership, an element of being respected. They feel they feel the relationship, they have the relationship with the objects that are being
Mhm.
preserved or being looked after by an institution. So I think mobile museum is very useful to community members who are finding it difficult to access the actual places.
That's a very interesting concept that you brought up. This is the first time that I heard a mobile museum,
Mhm.
and certainly it could be a very great format to interact with the communities and engage them in this as well. Can you maybe share a project or an example where this has taken place and has increased community partnership or something like that?
Okay, so mobile museums are usually focused. They're usually focused on school groups, on schools. So there are schools, say for instance, here in South Africa, I'm sure also elsewhere in the world, maybe in India as well. There are schools or areas that are based in remote areas. So here in South Africa, we have most museums in South Africa, they do have outreach programs. So
Mhm.
outreach programs, museums they reach out to these communities, to schools especially, because schools are always found in groups, and some of the museum subjects are part of the curriculum, school curriculums. So it is best to take that kind of a knowledge and incorporate into the school curriculums that are already there. And then so what we do as part of our
Mhm.
programs here at the museum, so we do have we do take our samples, and have, I think one of the as in one of my presentation slides there, it has, you saw the career, I talked about career exposure. So
Mhm.
something like that, we carry out career exposures during certain seasons. And then so those are the kind of things we have. So sometimes we have, I'll say, festivals where
Mhm.
there would be more like a group of different schools coming together, and then we just go there and then talk about museums, just show them what we do as museums. So that's the kind of things we do as museums.
I just wanted to find out. So mostly, when museums come to the people, are they bringing the real objects or just replicas of what is in the collection?
Okay, we've got replicas.
Mhm.
Replicas are usually made for artifacts that are quite sensitive to
Mhm.
environmental changes,
Mhm.
or artifacts that are very fragile, or artifacts that are threat. That, I mean, that pose threat. Like are in danger, maybe for
Mhm.
security, for theft and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So those are the objects that we make replicas for.
Mhm.
But we
Mhm.
also take original, authentic
Okay.
items,
Mhm.
but for those, we
Mhm.
have we reserve items like that for educational purposes. We have what we call a teaching collection. So
Mhm.
that kind of collection is there. It's reserved for that kind of a program.
Mhm.
But otherwise, many other objects are, we try by all means to keep them in the right environmental conditions in the storerooms. If people want to come and look at them, we can arrange behind the scenes tours.
Mhm.
uh, but as for mobile museums, we take a real teaching collection and then
Mhm.
replicas.
That is very interesting.
Mhm.
as we talk about accessibility and mobile museums and things like that,
Mhm.
how do you think digital technology can be integrated in the field of museology?
I would say right now museums need to embrace the digital technology for for accessibility of museum collection. And I was working for a project called Wiki Africa in Cape Town, and the idea was to get involved, to bring museums on board so they can share their collection. So I'll reach to different museums in South Africa, in Kenya, some parts of Nigeria, Cameroon, and they'll share what is in their collection in terms of images. So those images will upload them on Wiki Africa, which is a platform on Wikipedia. So that was a way of as much as we are trying to showcase what the continent has in terms of content, but it also helped people to know what these museums have. So because not many people have the opportunity to visit museums, um, because sometimes you do like a survey and realize that a lot of people visited museums when they were in elementary school. When they're adults, they
Mm.
don't go to museums. So I mean, making this collection into digital format, is the best avenue to share the collection widely. Not only in Africa, but beyond. So I think digital collection is the way to go for museums right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's correct. I agree with you, Francis, totally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one thing that museums do, I think that is becoming a norm to many museums now, and we are also, as KZN
Mm-hmm.
Museum, very much involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's online exhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm.
create online exhibitions. So
Mm-hmm.
what we do, we do things like 3D scan of our objects,
Mm-hmm.
and we also do normal photographs and
Mm-hmm.
of objects, and then attach those objects to to the metadata,
Mm-hmm.
and then upload those on the museum website,
Mm-hmm.
and then we then invite people through through museum social media pages,
Mm-hmm.
and and people will have access to that website, to that online exhibition,
Mm-hmm.
through social media pages. So we do lots of updates on social media. I think social media is the most powerful way
Mm-hmm.
to spread the word about museums. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the way, because
Yeah,
everyone seems to be on social media platform these days.
yeah, that's true.
Very true.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and just
And
something
so,
else, like some of the objects you might find they are in very far places, like like let's say in West Africa, in Mali, they have the Timbuktu manuscript. Some of us have
mm,
never seen those objects there. They look like, but if the museum there can take images and digitally upload it, then it gives that object access, so everybody can see what the manuscripts are all about. You know?
that's very true,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah.
Like Wikimedia India had actually partnered with a small museum
Mhm,
in Gujarat, and
mhm,
what we had done is digitalized all the manuscripts and the
mhm,
old books that
mhm,
they had and
mhm,
uploaded it on open source platforms so
mhm,
that more people had access to it. So
mhm,
it, in a way, also provided a way for researchers to have access to the scripts written inside it, as
mhm,
well as it increased the footfall of the museum because people started realizing that how rare sort of collection such a small museum has.
mhm,
So, and a
Wow.
lot of more community engagement was seen because of that.
mhm,
So
Yeah.
yes, I agree.
Yeah, and that kind of a thing, it became very popular and very useful during COVID time, when
mhm,
people had,
Yes.
were restricted to go to places. So,
mhm,
I mean, they because of these online exhibitions or digital system, to put our stuff on there, it was very useful because people had nothing to do. So
mhm.
they had nowhere to go. So I think COVID did open our eyes in that way.
True.
Yeah. And
Because
something else I was thinking about, as so far as we try so much to, embrace the digital aspect of collection management and development, we find that a lot of museums still are challenged, to have the human resource that are able to help them move from that analog platform to a digital platform. So, you know,
That is true.
hmm
Digitalization in itself takes a lot of time and
yeah,
resources.
hmm
That's true.
Yeah.
One of the comments from our live session also mentions that some of these manuscripts are also used on wiki source to create more detailed documents,
hmm
as Francis might be much more aware about because he
hmm
has worked on Wikipedia in such a detailed manner.
hmm Yep, because sometimes when you want to expand, you know, some content on Wikipedia, once you have those kind of articles, because Wikipedia is more of like it's not really a primary source; it's more of a secondary source where you build,
Mm.
people help building it. So if you have those kind of
True.
manuscript, then it helps, build the content that is there. So that is kind of very important to have that.
Mhm.
Hmm
Very true.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in both of your experiences, how do you think a foundation like Wikimedia can assist museums take these things forward and help them in better curation, or like how can we be, collaborate with museums?
To be honest, I'm not sure how Wikimedia works, but but because of this conversation that we're having, we, especially the topic of digital, digital accessibility, and I think that's the way Wikimedia can actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's how it can help. That's how it can come in and help museums. There are museums that are very, very, like, they are faced with these financial constraints. They cannot afford, they cannot afford, putting stuff on digitization because of, underfunding. But I think, digitization is the way, and it's very expensive. So many museums are struggling with funding.
Yeah.
So even if Wikimedia cannot really come in terms of funding, but they can help in, with ideas. I think,
Yeah.
and yeah, and just giving, example how this can work, in reality. I
Mhm.
think that's the way they can help out.
Yeah, I just think Wikimedia Foundation can come up with not only strategies but you know forming partnership with various museums and helping them out to to create easy access to the content they have. Um, we used to when we were doing Wiki Africa, we used to have something called Wiki Love Monuments, and that was like a contest on Wikipedia, and people around Cape Town will go around and use their smartphones, take photos of, different heritage, and upload them on Wikipedia. That is one easier aspect of, digitize the exhaust collection or monument, or even when they are at work, if it's a collection that is acceptable to be shared, they could take a photo of it and just, put the content up on Wikipedia, and that's one way of sharing that content. You know. So I think Wikipedia Foundation can come up like that, you know, forming partnership with different museums, especially museums in the global south, which are, going through certain challenges in terms of, funding for museum itself. Because as we know, in places like Africa, museums are not the main pivot or point of development. We have health that we need to talk about. We have you know other things of food security. So museums, in terms of the pyramid of funding, is always at the bottom. It's more of like uh, something that you do after. It's an afterthought. So you know,
Yeah, I think you're right. They are seen as luxury. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so there's lots of
Mm,
critical issues that we are faced with. But
mm,
I think, if Wikimedia can actually come in that way, try and bring awareness in how they can just partnering with these people who are faced with so many challenges. I think
mm,
that's the way to go.
mm, yep.
Mm,
Yes, I certainly agree. And
Mm,
just to address what Mutsunga said earlier about Wikimedia, so like
mm,
Wikimedia Foundation has a lot of sub projects under Wikimedia. The most popular ones is, of course, Wikipedia. And
mm,
then there's Wikimedia Commons, which allows you to
mm,
upload photos of all the
mm,
places, the collection, and everything on an
mm,
open source platform. It's a very
mm,
simple platform. You just drag and drop the photo, write
mm,
script, you just write the caption for it, and then it becomes accessible for everyone to
mm,
see, which
mm,
helps a lot in getting the limelight and spreading awareness about the range of collection that museums have. There's also
mm,
Wikisource and Wikidata, which are more
mm,
of a detailed content based algorithms. All of them are pretty simple to use, but
mm,
Wikidata is similar to Wikipedia, but in Wikipedia you write in the format of essays,
mm,
whereas in
mm,
Wikidata you insert specific facts. Like you don't
mm,
write that this artifact was collected in the year 1959, you just write
mm,
year and 1959, and it
mm,
gives you visual representation, timelines, and in different formats. So we have partnered with several museums and cultural organizations for similar projects, and it would be very interesting if we can also take this partnership ahead with your respective museums in the coming future.
oh, that sounds interesting. It sounds like Wikidata actually works on how, like, it's more similar to how museums works, because we work with, especially if you're working with some collections management softwares. So it's got specific fields that you put in some data there.
mm,
So I think Wikidata, that's how exactly museums works. I think that's many museums would prefer to work with that, because it's very
mm,
specific and it's easy to find
mm,
stuff if you're searching them. Yeah.
mm,
True. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that.
mm.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. I just think like right now with all those platforms that we have, and just the basis that you have Wikimedia or Wikipedia there, it's it provide an easy platform. It's not something that you paid for or something like that. So I think most museums that
yes.
are faced with challenges in terms of funding, that would be something easier for them to do. It will just be just allocating, having some people in the team that can be able to, help with, you know, uploading these contents, collections into
True.
the platform. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest advantage of Wikimedia, that they do not charge you for hosting your
Hmm.
information.
Hmm.
So irrespective of how big your files are, you can store it on a cloud on their platform, and you don't have to
Hmm.
pay for any cloud storage or anything like that,
Hmm.
which is usually
Hmm.
a very big challenge for otherwise museums, because all the art, like if you do a 3D photography of an artifact, the file in itself is in GBs,
Yeah.
so you cannot do that for the entire museum.
Hmm.
Okay, that's super. Yeah, the only issue with with this kind, museums are actually skeptical in considering this because of security. There's a whole lot
Hmm.
of museum theft and all that. So I mean, say for instance, many museums here in South Africa, they've been approached by many other electronic databases, systems. Uh, but museums have been finding it difficult, to actually getting involved because of that kind of a threat, because of they feel like, if they put their items out there,
Hmm.
they feel like, they are now exposing the items to people who are the collectors, say to
Yeah.
say, who are just looking for stuff to steal. So I
Hmm.
think that's one challenge. That's where I think the issue of security needs to be tightened up in that way.
Yeah.
Museums need to be assured how safe it is.
Yeah, that is certainly a very interesting point. Definitely.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how prone security issues are there in museums? Like I'm not very familiar with museology.
Mm,
Um, well, there are. It's mainly to do with artifact looting and trading.
mm,
People steal artifacts for trading. They make money out of artifacts. They take them for auction and get monies, and just like that. So if now, let's say for instance, I put some kind of an ivory here which got heritage value, but to someone it means nothing. It to them, they look at it and they see wealth, because they know they can take it somewhere and get some financial benefits from it. um, so once they know that this kind of object, this museum in South
mm,
Africa or in India or wherever, it's got this kind of an artifact that can actually make lots of monies for them, they then target that museum. Then for some reason they just find a way through in. They just find a way to get into that kind of collection. And some pretend to be researchers. They request access to the collection as researchers. So that's how museums get. That's how things get stolen from museums, and sometimes it even involves the insiders. It
mhm,
becomes an
yep,
inside jobs.
mhm,
Because
mhm,
remember, curators, collections managers, or museum practitioners themselves, museologists, they're the people who know the collection better than anyone else.
mhm,
So that's why it becomes an inside job most of the times.
yep,
So that's the kind of security issues museums are faced with.
yeah, yeah. That's true. I mean, museum security is always a most of the time it's always an inside job because it's only the curators, conservators who know the value of what they have. People outside don't know, because
That's true.
a lot of some of the collection, people don't get a chance to see them because they're back there in the basement. But once they
Hmm.
arrive, the conservators can tell what value this object has, and that's where sometimes things happen. They go missing. You know? So, but it takes a lot of. It doesn't take much. Maybe um, if this museum can be able to embrace that and just while they are receiving the objects, they can also take the images and share. But I see the point of Muzu because it would be like taking a photo and putting it out there, alerting people, hey, we have this here. Yeah, so
It's true.
um, mm, yeah,
That could become an immediate threat for the
immediate
museum.
threat from museums. Yep, and of course, a lot of museums in Africa um, are government run, and there's a lot of bureaucracy. It's just not straightforward. If you want to do something, you have to go through one step to another, and things are always in a lot of red tapes to do certain things. Yeah.
So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, because
uh,
mhm.
yes, please
oh,
continue.
I was gonna say, I remember when I was doing the Wiki Africa project and I was approaching different museums to share the content. uh, it used to take a while because they had to like go through one person. There was so much bureaucracy just to have an image of a certain object or the collection they have. You know, it used to take time, but eventually it started coming through. But if you have a project that you have a time frame and deadline, then you know you are at a disadvantage. Yeah,
That is true.
yeah,
It's a time-taking process because a lot of stakeholders are a
yeah.
part of
Involved.
it, and
Hmm. Hmm.
yes.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah.
So as we approach the end of this session, I'll
Uh-huh.
just like to ask one last question.
Okay.
That how do you see young people being involved in museology, and do you think that young people are more or less interested in uh, curation of museums in the coming few years?
I,
Yeah, I was going to say that
uh,
yeah, because museums the terminology itself, museums, it sounds like an outdated and old thing, because because it feels like these are places where people just go and dump all these ancient things. And
mm,
it just by that, young
mm,
people,
mm,
they feel uninterested. But
mm,
I think museums should change, should go with changes. They should
mm,
be alive. And I think they should look at what is happening, what are these young people more interested in. They should try and bring fun. They should try and make museums alive and be more interesting, and not be seriously focused on on the initial ideas of museums, but bring changes.
mm,
But still remain, remain in the authentic mission and
mm,
vision, and the authentic motive of the creation of museums. So I mean, we've just been talking about digital systems here. Museums
mm,
should be into judicial system, because that's where youth are more interested in digital stuff.
mm,
So we should bring, say, for instance, performances, to the museums. Let's say sometimes just host things like, jazz concert or something in museums. So that will
mm,
bring people, and people will get to be exposed to what museums have. I think if you bring some kind of entertainment, then youth will be more interested in
mm.
museums. Yeah.
Yeah, I think mostly it's always the issue to deal with the kind of exhibition museums have. Like here in the States, I see it, they have they have something like a selfie museum, and you have a lot of young people going to selfie museum. They take images and all that. But if your museum is just based on traditional kind of museum, then you end up alienating the young or the youth, because the more contemporary your exhibition is that is aligned to what is going on around, the more the more it's easier for the youth to come to the museum. And I was back home in Kenya just 2 weeks ago, and I saw the number of kids going to the museum. There are kids that have been brought bused from schools to the museum. You know, you don't see like just young people walking to the museum like that. It has to be
Hmm.
they're coming with the school. You know, so that's the main challenge of trying to just making young people go to the museum. It's a big challenge. And also the idea that museum was kind of an elite kind of thing. It it tends to alienate a lot of people from even going to it. Because you think you're just going to go there and see some a photo of some old old European painting. you know so the young people
Hmm.
nowadays, they are you know they appreciate that, but that's not what's going to make them go to that museum. you know so it's a lot of work for museums to do right now in terms of bringing in the young people to these places. Yeah.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. Like I very recently visited a very small museum,
Mm-hmm.
and the collection was pretty small. But what
Mm-hmm.
they had done is they had a collection of old cameras and projectors, like
Mm-hmm.
from 1850s and 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
So, like they had some of them in a working condition. So
Mm-hmm.
they just showed us, how that camera used to work, and they
Mm-hmm.
showed us that how in like early 1950s, the first
Mm-hmm.
movie that was created, how it used to work. So
Mm-hmm.
that was much more interesting to see that piece in work
Mm-hmm.
and how it used to work at that time. They also had some musical instruments which are not
Yep.
used anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
they played it for us,
Mm-hmm.
which made even though the collection was very small, it
Mm-hmm.
made the visit so much more, memorable for me. That,
Yeah.
oh, this is how, like, you have grown up listening to the stories of grandparents that in our
Mm-hmm.
olden times, this is how
Mm-hmm.
it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But to see that live was a
Mm-hmm.
completely different experience.
Yeah.
So maybe a lively touch could be a good
Yeah.
addition
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah,
it.
because mostly the traditional way of setting up a museum exhibition is that people go to the museum and it's like, don't touch this, don't touch this, don't touch that.
Yeah.
But young people want to have some interaction with those objects.
True.
But if you tell them, oh, you're just going to go and look, then chances are they're like, oh, I can see it on the phone. I don't need to go there, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the
Yeah.
items were still operated by the museum people to ensure
yeah,
that it is not damaged,
it's not
but we
down.
got
Yep,
to see it in a working condition.
yep.
So it was very interesting. That was the first time like I went to a
Mhm,
museum where I could see the actual
mhm.
functioning of the object.
Wow, yeah.
And one thing I just want to mention, one thing that
Mm,
that had recently happened
mm,
here where I invest. This is something that attracted youth actually because
mm,
you try and target something that it's a challenge that youth is faced with, the
mhm,
job creation, job seeking, on strategies on how to find jobs. So
mhm,
what this museum did at some point, they hosted
mhm,
a session where they invited experts in recruitment
mhm,
and try and advise youth public
mhm,
to say try
mhm,
and advise how they can best develop a CV,
mhm.
they can develop they can best make their CV look attractive to
Oh,
possible potential employers. So,
mhm,
so this is something that was hosted in a museum,
mhm,
and by doing that, you're attracting youth, and then you also show youth what the museum has.
mhm,
You also focused on the challenges that youth are faced with, and
mhm,
also you can have some museums. Not all museums can afford, but
mhm,
some museums can afford to have planetarium. So that is
mhm,
the scientific
Hmm.
world where youth are more interested in science,
mhm,
modern things.
mhm,
So planetarium is something exciting, and you know, it's something that people want to look at. You can
mhm,
bring up things like those.
mhm.
Very true.
Yeah, yep, yes. You know, it's just interesting how different museums always try to remain relevant. Um, but in so doing, sometimes they miss the point where, like, what is the space for the young people in museums? Because sometimes when they make up policies, the policy is too, tends to alienate certain people because it doesn't look at the grassroots. Like, it looks more at the tourist and forgets that the local population can also be the tourists, to go to these museums and learn what is going on because they're the
True.
creators of those some of the collection that they have in the museum. So you know maybe uh, policies, governing museums should be you know developed in a way that it attracts youth too. Yeah. Mm,
Very true.
yeah.
So, as we are approaching our end of the session,
Mm,
I would just summarize that thank you so much, both of you, for being here
mm,
and giving us such good insights about what is museums and how they are very important in our society,
mm,
how there are so many factors and parameters that goes into developing a museum, engaging community, engaging youth in the entire spectrum, and how they are very important if we want to preserve our heritage for our future generations to come.
mm.
So once again, thank you both for being here and taking out the time. It was a wonderful session, and yes,
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. I think it's my first time, having this kind of an engagement. I think it has opened my eyes. I see things differently, and I think I've learned a lot from both of you. I think
Mm.
I've learned something that I can also apply to here where I am. And thank you very much once again.
Yeah. Thank you very much for Wiki Heritage. Thank you, Kushi, for the invite. This has been wonderful. Got opportunity to meet Muzunga here. He had some very insightful comments about the museum in KwaZulu Natal, and I also learned a lot from you, Kushi, what Wikimedia, Wiki World Heritage has for museums. So I deeply appreciate for the opportunity to be in this forum. Yep.
thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Have a wonderful day ahead.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. You
You
too.
too. Thank you.